On July 12, 1965, on the top of his doghouse, Snoopy started writing a novel under slogan, "Here is the world-famous author writing." And from then on, and on numerous occasions, typed the first sentence of his novel Never to Be. It was a dark and stormy night. In 1830, Edward Bulwer Lytton's novel Paul Clifford opened with, "It was a dark and stormy night." Eugène Sue, after few instructions to the readership, opened The Mysteries of Paris with "On the cold and rainy evening of December 13, 1838. Snoopy is just a copycat. His melodramatic fiction never passed over the first sentence, leaving us nothing else to compare. Parallels between Bulwer Lytton and Sue exceed their first sentences. Paul Clifford and Rodolphe, the Grand Duke of Gerolstein, both live double life in aristocratic salons and in criminal underworld of the city. In aristocratic salons, they are dandies, and in the criminal underground, they are dandies in disguise. Bulwer Lytton and Sue were dandies themselves and belonged to the same Anglo-French circle and salon of dandies. Charles Baudelaire was right to say that dandy is a man who elevates the aesthetic to a living religion. That, alas, could not last forever. Dandies usually inherited a family fortune, spending it on their way of life until they were broke and bankrupt. But dandy's life usually had two parts. The first one, when he had assets to indulge in arranging himself and his life according to the aesthetic religion, and the second one, when he had to work for survival. To become an artist seemed the most acceptable option because it allowed professing dandy cult through art, proposing the aesthetic arrangement of society. Sue made his name with novels feuilletons, later in his life to continue with novels à livraison, printed in prepaid delivered parts. In their novels, Bulwer Lytton and Sue expressed Benthamist socialism. To use art as a tool for social change has been described by Théophile Gautier as a strange new sort of small mushrooms which sprang out of the territory fertilized with Saint-Simonian theories. Sue and Bulwer Lytton fell into Gautier's characterization nicely as those responding to utilitarian demands and betraying the purely artistic art for art's sake. By definition of Saint-Simon, the Mysteries of Paris are genuine avant-garde art. The successful performative of Sue's novel, however, is that one can recognize what is good and right, not by theoretical arguments, but from the aesthetic attractiveness of it. What appealed to German young Hegelians around Bruno Bauer were the Mysteries of Paris as Bildungsroman, through which the spirit of modern liberal age comes to its self-realization, revealing the mystery of modernity in its full sense. Anyway, that is what Seliga developed in his article on Sue's novel. Marx devoted to Seliga's text an extended part of the Holy Family. As we get to know from Engels' article, Rapid Progress of Communism in Germany, published by London journal The New Moral World and Gazette of the Rational Society, the burden of criticism was divided between German communist intellectuals. Bauer belonged to Marx and Engels, and Stirner belonged to others. So that is why in Holy Family we don't have criticism of Stirner, in spite of the fact that Stirner also wrote about Sue's novel. In Germany, socialism is vague, undefined, and undefinable. In England, communism cannot be distinguished from socialism, but it can be presented as something acceptable and not too radical if it is linked with Owen's idea of the universal community. A war declared against Hegelian philosophers in Germany is also a war for self-understanding of communism. And in Germany, it has to deal with specifically Hegelian legacy, which turns everything concrete and practical into something abstract, purely spiritual and dogmatic. The full frame of Seliga's interpretation is found at the beginning and at the end of his article, and in between is a journey from art to morality. At the beginning, he says axiomatically, the art is free. He explains that art has a nature of its own, religion of its own, legality of its own, truth of its own, and love of its own. Being free, art can choose its object freely on its own territory, free of politics, science, and life. In conclusion, Seliga claims that the true object of art is what is eternal and absolute. But what it shows at its surface is contemporary and imperfect, and the terrain it covers that way is morality. In the third part of chapter 7 of Marx's text, The Revelation of the Mysteries of Law, Marx opens fire upon proposed morality as a solution for all social troubles. His account is shown in a table which exposes two ways of confronting social evil. The first one with police force and another, Seligas and SAZU, with moral police forces. The first approach attacks evil with punishment, the second one attacks evil with reward, which beautiful souls get from becoming subjects or objects of charity. Marx's table do not need any more explanation because now we live under the realm of neoliberal police, reformed with the help of moral police. We know what it tells about. The struggle between good and evil, organized as an artwork, is melodrama. In her analysis of C's work, Cornelia Striede puts melodrama and social criticism together to overcome prejudice against trivial literature on one and prejudice against ideological use of literature on another side. Striede names four fundamental structural elements of C's melodramatic narrative: stereotype, mystery, chance, and antithesis. Following Walburga-Hülk's dissertation, we should add physiognomics as a narrative strategy similar to the part music had in Rousseau's melodramatic Pygmalion, to introduce and induce reader with appropriate emotions and affects. I will not go into all of these characteristics to save time, but just two. Mysteries function in opposite direction as stereotypes. Stereotypes stimulate the reader to feel safe, while mysteries make him or her nervous and stimulates him or her to continue reading to find a clue and solution. The reason that these mysteries and revelations become attractive is not the desire for social truth, it is their aestheticization, which, contrary to the stereotype of the beautiful soul, produces an image of barbarians and primitives, an image which directly corresponds to fixation on the primitive other, who, in spite of being poor and culturally undeveloped, enjoys what the wealthy, obeying multiple social conventions and rules, cannot. Mysteries allow, as much as it can be suggested in that period, for perverse desire to have its way. This aesthetic lime twig has an ideological grip. It enables that, together with sexual innuendos, excessive violence, especially towards children, and disgusting manners and language, the reader gets involved in a process which leads from introductory image of mysterious mass of modern urban society to the final image of this mass individualized into an articulated and differentiated class. Following the flow of narration, one gets both confirmation and negation of author's introductory lesson on masses. Namely, before we are situated into cold and rainy evening, we are introduced to Le Tapis Franc, a tavern where low-life persons come together and where police spies mingle. After a short introduction to this public point of criminal and police communication, we are warned. This beginning, writes the author, is announcing the reader that he will have to get involved with sinister scenes. If he agrees to follow, he will penetrate horrible regions unknown to him. This social ecosystem of dirty cesspools is filled up by types like reptiles in a swamp. Then we are offered an analogy between American Indians and lower classes of modern urban population. The entire world has read admirable pages where Cooper, the American Walter Scott, describes wild customs of savages, their picturesque language, poetic, thousand cunning tricks, which help them to escape or follow their enemies. But there is no need to look for savages elsewhere. They inhabit our own modern world. We will try to demonstrate, says C, in front of readers' eyes a few episodes from the life of the other barbarians, who, as much as savage tribes painted by Cooper, are beyond civilization. It is just that barbarians we are telling you about are among us. These men have their own customs, their own kind of women, their own language, a mysterious one full of deadly images and disgusting bloody metaphors. Writing this page, continues the narrator in his own voice, we could not escape certain squeezing of the heart. We don't dare to say painful anxiety. In spite of this horrible step into the swamp and sewage, the narrator counts on readers' timid curiosity, which terrible spectacles sometimes excite. But if the reader decides to follow the narrator, to pay a visit the lowest level of social ladder, the atmosphere will get more and more purified. The antithesis is used abundantly, but its fundamental structure may be reduced to confrontation between good and evil. The resolution of this antithesis is not Aristotelian purification, but moral police decision. Good is not right, but nice. As in Bernard Shaw's remark on what bothers aesthetically delicate souls in modern society. There are so many poor and ugly people visible from their windows and their walks through the city that it makes them impossible to enjoy their good lives for real. Their socialism is, tells Shaw, in a wish to make lower classes appear clean, well-shaven and nicely dressed. Primitive but pleasurable barbarians. What Shaw ridicules in Preface to Major Barbara is dandy socialism in its purest form. In addition to antithetical class confrontation, one should add that SAZU starts with transportation from Cooper's Indians to modern proletarians, squeezing barbarians and primitives into one. Squeezing together two categories of progressive states of human development in time and in space, he represents modern masses at the same time as noble savages and as uncivil evil. With support of such an image of social totality, we get a kind of equation of class and race. The equation of living person of the author and his work could be criticized with Adorno's words as an abdication which turns an artwork into a document. This same equation could be denied its rights with the help from Bakhtin. One can speak of a pure author as distinct from a partially depicted, designated author who enters as part of the work. This does not mean that there are no paths from the pure author to the author as person. They exist, of course, and they exist in the very core, the very depth of man. But this core can never become one of the images of the work itself. The image is in the work as a whole and to the highest degree, but this core can never become a constituent, figural, objective part of the work. This is not natura creata or natura naturata et creata, but pure natura creans et non creata. For the reader, the author as real person is beyond reach. What he gets is an image of pure author. Consequently, when the reader becomes a reader, that is when he or she starts reading, he or she is also created by the author, if and when he or she is following the narration and by that entering into dialogue with the author. The reader cannot confront the author in person and cannot comprehend the author otherwise but to follow the path of narration in full trust and confidence. The status of reader is that of the second part of nature. He or she is created by the author, but he or she creates as well. This relationship between the author and the reader is exactly what she is getting at initially, using direct dialogue with the reader on several other occasions during the narrative to bring the contract, the promise, and the bond with the pure author to memory. The contract. You will go beyond the reach of your senses and comprehension across the partition. The promise. You will get over tightening of your heart and painful anxiety to experience the life of the damned other you fear and admire at the same time. What you will see is horrible, violent, perverse, and you will enjoy it. The bond. Nobody will see your perversion and your desire for horrible, violent, perverse. Your desire and your joy will be hidden and removed by continuous moral cleansing. Thanks to Edgar Allan Poe, a contemporary of Agency, we do not need Adorno or Bakhtin, really, to take the mysteries of Paris from the critique of ideology and police back to art and the aesthetic. Better part of Poe's essay is devoted to mistakes in translation by C.H. Town, but in a short characterization of Mystery of Paris, a work of unquestionable power, he mentions three main artistic features. One, it is a convulsive fiction, of a kind where the incidents are consequential from the premises, while the premises themselves are laughably incredible. Admitting, for instance, the possibility of such a man as Rodolphe and of such a state of society as would tolerate his perpetual interference, we have no difficulty in agreeing to admit the possibility of his accomplishing all that is accomplished. His second characteristic which distinguishes the SAZU school is the total want of the ars celare artem, art concealing its means. The wires are not only not concealed, but displayed as things to be admired. Equally with the puppets they set in motion. We are brought into a world of accessible and free manipulation, completely manageable world, which is an image of the world common not just to writers of melodramatic or biomechanic fiction, but also to neoliberals, socialists, and Hegelians. Thirdly, the philosophical motives attributed to SAZU are absurd in the extreme. His first, and in fact his sole object, is to make an exciting and therefore saleable book. The cant implied or direct about the amelioration of society, etc., is but a very usual trick among authors, whereby they hope to add such a tone of dignity or utilitarianism to their pages as shall gild the pill of their licentiousness. Typical for these engrafting a meaning upon otherwise unintelligibles, says Poe, is this ruse as an afterthought, manifested in the shape of a moral, either appended as in Aesop, or dovetailed into the body of the work piece by piece with great care, but never without leaving evidence of its after-insertion. All philosophical, ideological, political, and other aspects of a novel have to be taken and interpreted as literary means. In case of Sy, his tricks and ruses create the world of the novel as a puppet theater where we can see the puppeteer and the strings. The pure author is not hiding behind the curtain as the Wizard of Oz, but stands in front of us and admits that he is a manipulator, announcing or interpreting his previous or next move. These movements are at the core of convulsive fiction, helping to make unfounded premises acceptable. The third Mark thesis on Feuerbach, therefore, does not apply on literary fiction. Here it is. There is no need to educate poor author of the narrative. That is why art gets possession of the avant-garde by Saint-Simon. No rational deliberation can bring out an instant breakthrough as efficiently. What is forgotten here is that it works only in fiction, and that in society where things enter into social relations instead of humans, humans have to be divided into two parts anyway. Engels' invention of scientific socialism to explain Marx's position, if understood in positivist terms, transports us back to Sy's puppeteer identified by Poe. For Marx, science means overcoming the position of le sujet supposé savoir, a subject necessary for melodramatic fiction as well as for melodramatic socialism, and equally necessary for police proper and moral police. The aesthetic regime of art can question the boundaries of art and life with the help of presupposed existence of natura creans et non creata, or le sujet supposé savoir. Socialism would like to cross the line too, first from life to art, and then back. Following Bachtin's premises, they get stuck with art, unable to get out of puppet theater, or stuck with life, unable to escape scientific and positivist determinism. Not unusually, they get stuck with both. Marx says that he learned more about French society from reading Balzac's novels in spite of his conservative ideology. With Sy, one may conclude that in spite of his socialist ideology, we can learn more about socialism before 1848 than from Manifesto, Civil Wars in France, and 18th Brumaire. Not because Sy's novel would be a popular or even populist aestheticization of his politics or ideology, but because the means he is using to construct the narration are exposed in the open, making the pure author clearly visible as he turns incredible premises into acceptable accomplishments. That is politics of the aesthetic, to turn incredible premises into acceptable accomplishment. It was not my intention to prove that the ideological works of art can be good works of art, or that artworks which belong to the popular culture can be good artworks. It was to bring the mysteries of Paris where they belong, to the pure author's pure reader. Thank you.